This is Ed Crow. I'm glad we got good registration, good turnout for the webinar today. I was a little hesitant to do one this week, but it's been a long AEP, and we tend not to run them during AEP because we know people are busy, including ourselves. So this will be the first, and we will be running webinars from here on out, basically, and we tend to do them on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock. So a couple things. I see a bunch of new names. If you haven't done a webinar with us before, what we do is I try to keep them fairly short, 15 to 25 minutes, usually depending on the topic. We do record all of our webinars, so for future reference, if you want to join one of our webinars, but you just can't make it at that time, because like I said, we tend to do them at Wednesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern. If you can't make it, don't worry. If you just register, you'll get the recording. So you don't have to attend to get the recording. So if you have any questions, send them into the webinar. As I mentioned earlier, I will answer them at the end, or I'll try to answer them, hopefully, and maybe I'll even answer them correctly at the end for you. So I'm just not skilled enough to do the webinar and answer questions at the same time, unfortunately. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think other than that, I think I'll get us started. Okay, I'm gonna stray from what I said, and I am gonna answer one question. Somebody said, can I share the PowerPoint? Yes, of course. We'll send the recording, which will be the recording going through the PowerPoint. If you want the actual PowerPoint itself, you can just call our office, and we'd be happy to provide it to you. So that's not a problem at all. All right, so let's get started here. So here are our topics. We're going to talk about waivers for Part B for people age 65 and older, obviously, because we're talking about Medicare with employer plans. We'll talk about Cobra and VA, delayed B, enrollment and rule changes. The rule changes are really important, especially if you're working with a lot of people with Medicare that are still actively working when they're 65. I know a lot of people specifically go after that crowd, but it just tends to be that a lot of people nowadays are working when they hit Medicare age. So it's important to know those rules for the delayed Part B, how to enroll them, and the rule changes, which are substantial. Two specific things we'll go over. We're going to hit a lot of other stuff, and the reason I put this other stuff in there is these are questions that come up a ton. For us, it's things that get done wrong a lot, so I just wanted to kind of point those out. So things like having an HSA with Medicare, talk about Part D, SEP during using your SEP during the IEP, things such as that. As I said, we record all these webinars, we'll email them out, and if you want to, I guess if you're really bored and you want to watch all of our recorded webinars, we put them all on YouTube. So it's just, all you have to do is just Google youtube.com Crow and Associates, and that'll be our YouTube channel. We'll send you the link to that when we email you. But we have a lot of webinars on there for the last couple years that we've done. And again, people who are joining right now, if you have questions, just send them into the question section, and I will definitely answer them for you at the end. Okay, before we get into the presentation, it's only one page. I know nobody got on to listen to me talk about what we offer, but I'll give you one page of the benefits we offer to agents. So we have our T65 Medicare seminar program. That's our most popular program. We're averaging over 50 prospects per seminar. You can run those countrywide year-round, even during AEP. Turnkey program, you don't have to invite any of the people. The vendor we use does it. They do it. We have the presentations made. We have a webinar recorded on the presentation, how you can go through it. Certainly, you can use your own if you want. We can tailor that presentation specifically to you if you want to use one of our versions of it. And best practices. We've gone to a lot of webinars that our agents have done. I've done many of them over the years myself. So we've kind of got all the details down so we can, from start to finish, tell you kind of all the best practices from as far as how to serve the meals, where to have the venue, that kind of thing. Great program. We have our $500 a month Medicare marketing and lead cost program. So basically any agent that works with us, if you have your Medicare contracts with us, there's no minimum to start. There's no reduction in commission for sure. Everybody with us is paid direct by the carrier. And you can send us your paid expenses to generate Medicare leads, Medicare marketing, Medicare advertising, and we'll reimburse you up to $500 a month on our program. We offer online enrollment to all our agents at no cost, all three platforms, Sunfire, Medicare Bot, and Connector, and yes, all three with call recording. So we've added that feature. I know some uplines are doing access to some of those systems without the recording. Ours is included at no cost. For agents that need a website, we build free websites for agents with a quote engine for Medicare, quote and enrollment engine in it. We're embedding the Sunfire or Connector Pearl in the site. We can tailor that site specifically to you. We have discounted E&O insurance. Our base level E&O is $301 a year. That is for just Medicare and final expense. It covers carriers that you have through us and the carriers you don't have with us. And then our more kind of comprehensive one that covers all lines of business, carriers with and without us, is the upline. That's $426. So I think our pricing's pretty good. If you have questions about that, you can certainly just give us a call. We do SEO guidance, so we can show you how to win on Google search. That's how we built Crow & Associates, is through Google search. We don't pay anything for it. It's just know-how and putting the time in, basically. And I can definitely show agents how to do that for recruiting purposes, for recruiting Medicare prospects. Really kind of a passion of mine. I like doing that a lot, so I'm happy to go over it with people who want to listen to me, I guess. And then we'll do training on all aspects of Medicare and other lines of business too, such as final expense, LTC, term. We have quote engines for everything. Annuities, that you can access all those quote engines for free, like our annuity quote engine is Annuity Rate Watch. And we'll do training in person, webinars, or by phone. So that's it. That's the quick rundown of what we offer. So when you're talking Medicare with employer plans, let's talk about the valid waiver for Part B. Something that's really important to keep in mind is when can somebody waive Part B? So I want to go over that just so we're all on the same page. So when you're actively working, you're 65 or older, working for an employer, there's 3 rules you have to meet. There's 3 criteria to waive Part B, and one of them I think we tend to forget, which is the second one on here. But the first is you have to be actively working, or you have to have coverage through an actively working spouse. One quick note, domestic partners don't count. I get that question sometimes. It's got to be, domestic partners aren't recognized by CMS for the purposes of this. So first rule, got to be actively working or getting coverage through an actively working spouse. Second rule, and the one that some of us maybe don't pay as much attention to, we need to start doing it now, is the group must be 20 or more employees. So if you're actively working but you're not on a group of 10 and you're getting coverage through work, you can't waive Part B when you turn 65. That's got to be a group of 20 or more. And that's because of the MSP, the Medicare Secondary Payer Rules. So the biggest thing with this is the rule's always been there, but it really wasn't enforced in the past. Because if you think about it, the way that works is a group of less than 20, Medicare is primary. A group of 20 or more, the carrier plan is primary. So when somebody was in a group of less than 20, in the past, if they were actively working, getting coverage through work, they wouldn't sign up for B, and they got away with it, more or less. Even though Medicare was primary, the group plan would just pay all the claims on the B services. Well, that's not happening the last couple of years. So especially the last few years, you get a lot of claims denied where the employer plan says, well, this is a group of less than 20. You didn't sign up for B. You're 66, for example. You didn't sign up for B, and as a result, we're not paying 80% of this claim because Medicare should have been primary for you on Part B. So that's the second rule. So actively working, group of 20 or more. And then the big one is you got to have coverage through the working person. So, and that coverage must be through the employer. So if I'm getting coverage through my spouse, my actively working spouse, my spouse's coverage must be from the employer that they're working for. You get a lot of scenarios where maybe somebody's actively working, but they're getting coverage through a former employer, or maybe coverage through the exchange. It doesn't count. So that working person coverage must be through the active employer they're currently working for. That's a big one. Comes up a lot. And I do see we're getting some questions, and I do promise you I will answer those for you at the end. Okay, so those are the 3 rules. You got to be meeting all 3 of those requirements in order to have a valid waiver for Part B of Medicare. Cobra. So Cobra is a big one. Cobra is a little tricky because Cobra certainly is not a waiver for Part B of Medicare. However, Cobra is a waiver for D. So you got to enroll in Medicare B if you're not actively working. So the election for a BSEP is when you stop working. So if you think about it, somebody who's not working, who's getting Cobra, they can't waive Part B because they're not actively working anymore. They have Cobra coverage. So Cobra is not a valid waiver for B. So, if that person is working, getting coverage through work, and it's a group of more than 20, and they retire, when they retire, even if they're getting coverage through work, let's say not even Cobra, they're still getting it through the active employer plan. When they retire, that is their Part B election. So Cobra is not a valid waiver. And keep in mind, you have 8 months to enroll after you lose your job-based coverage or stop working, and it's whichever comes first. So I forget sometimes myself, and I think they have 60 days, but they don't. So somebody's 66 years old, they're working for a company, they decide to retire, but they're going to keep their work coverage somehow. Maybe there's a great employee or something. That triggers their election for B when they stop working, even though they continue to have coverage. Cobra now, however, is a waiver for Part D. As long as the coverage through Cobra is creditable, it's a Part D waiver. So it doesn't waive B, but it does waive D if it's creditable coverage. Same thing with VA. Gets, I think, a little mixed up sometimes. So VA coverage is a valid waiver for Part D, but it certainly is not a valid waiver for B. So a lot of times you get people who say, well, I have VA, so I didn't have to get B, and they're wrong. They did. VA doesn't waive it. Okay, other things to remember. This one I've done wrong myself over the years. You can't use an SEP for Medicare B during the Medicare IEP. So in English, let's say you have a person who's turning 65 in June, they're actively working. So because they're turning 65 in June, their IEP for Medicare is the 3 months before the month they turn 65, which is June, and the 3 months after the month they turn 65. So what you'll do sometimes is the person, let's say in July, says, well, I'm going to retire. And you think to yourself, well, I can put this in as an SEP for loss of group coverage, and you can't. The loss of group coverage SEP will not work during their IEP. And I've had that happen in the past. That's because there's a delay when you enroll in B after your effective date. So I've thought to myself, well, if I put them in using their IEP election, they turn 65 in June, but this is August. If I put them in using their IEP election, there's going to be a delay, a 2-month delay in their B enrollment. So I'll use the SEP for loss of group, and you can't. They block it. So just something to keep in mind and remember. Last thing with that is when somebody does a delayed B enrollment, so again, they're 67 years old, they lose group coverage, they enroll in Part B. Remember, if you're going to enroll them in an MA plan, a common error is the enrollment period for that is prior to the B effective date. It is not 60 days after. So they're going to get B for September 1st. That MA app has to be in prior to the effective date of their B. That's the election. And it's commonly put in wrong, so just something to keep in mind. Okay, enrolling in Medicare B this is another one that comes up a lot. Enrolling in Medicare Part B is not an election for a PDP plan. So, and then I think this is probably one I've screwed up in the past too, is I guess somebody who, they're a delayed B enrollment, they're enrolling in B when they're 68 years old because they were working, getting coverage through work. They retire, they enroll in Part B, and they want a supplement and drug plan. And I'll try to put that in using an IEP. Well, it's going to get denied on the D because you're eligible for Part D when you're in Medicare A only. So the way you have to handle that is you can't use an IEP election for that D. You've got to use an SEP for loss of group coverage. So just to retouch on so if people screw this up and they enroll in Medicare late and they didn't have a valid waiver, the Medicare Part B delayed enrollment penalty is it's 10% of the base Part B premium. So 10% of $164.90 for 2023, and they're assessed a 10% penalty for every 12-month period that they don't have B. So in other words, somebody goes 5 years without B, their penalty is going to be 50%. Question comes up a lot, what about IRMA? So what if somebody's paying an IRMA? Is the 10% on the whole price, including the IRMA? No, the 10% is only on the base price. Okay, another one, weird rule for people on Medicare due to disability. We mentioned that, if you're actively working, it matters if you're in a group of less than 20 or 20 or more. Different for people that are on Medicare due to disability under the age of 65. So if you're on Medicare due to disability under the age of 65, the group size number then is 100 employees. So instead of 20, it's 100. So just something so in other words, they need to be enrolled in Medicare Part B, even if they're working, if the group is less than 100 employees because of the Medicare primary rule. So somebody who turns 65 and they're actively working for a group of 15 employees, but they're just turning 65 regular Medicare eligible, they have to sign up for Part B. But if somebody's disabled and they're actively working and they were on Medicare prior to 65 due to disability, that number's 100. If they're in a group less than 100, then they've got to sign up for B even if they're working. So again, the rule for those age 65 on Medicare, because they aged in naturally to Medicare, is less than 20 employees for Medicare to be primary. One thing about the disability piece is that somebody, let's say they were on Medicare due to disability age 50, they were with a group less than 100, they never signed up for B, and then they're charged a penalty. Well, that penalty for them will end when they hit age 65. So just something to remember. Okay, so went over those rules. Those are definitely rules that trip people up a lot. And kind of what dovetails into this is the change to the delayed Part B enrollment. So just to set the record straight, as we all know, when you're enrolling in, until in the past, I should say, when somebody was enrolling in Medicare Part B on a delayed basis, their choices were limited. For example, if somebody was in their IEP and they enrolled in Medicare the month they turned 65 or the 3 months after, they had a delay in their Part B effective date. If it was in the 3 months after, when they applied, they had a 2-month delay before they were effective. Then the same thing went with the GEP. So let's say somebody missed their election for B completely, and then they call you up and say, well, I lost group coverage, and I've been retired for a couple of years, I lost group coverage, but I want B now. Well, in the past, they had to sign up during the GEP. And during the general election period, it was a January 1 through March 31st election period for them to sign up for B. And it didn't kick in their effective date till July 1. Well, those rules have changed. So there no longer will be a delay in either scenario. So we'll go backwards. The person who is using the general election period, as of January 1, 2023, that person who applies in January, they'll be effective for Part B February 1st, February, March 1, and March, April 1. No more July 1 anymore. Any applicable penalty will still apply, but they won't have the delay. Same thing goes then on the IEP. So the person who was signing up for Medicare A and B, the month they turned 65 or the 3 months after they turned 65, they had a delay in their B enrollment of 2 months. That's going away. Now it's just going to be the first of the next month. So that's a really big change and something that we, I think it will help people with some flexibility. New thing they also added with this is a number of Part B SEP, special election periods for Part B that will be available in 2023. So the person that misses their IEP, let's say they miss the general election period this coming year, they might still have a valid SEP. And they listed a bunch of them. I put kind of the more common ones here. If they experience an emergency or disaster during their B enrollment period, that could make them eligible for an SEP. Here's an interesting one. If the employer or health plan made a material error, omission, or misrepresentation of the facts, meaning the Medicare B rules, that could be an SEP for them. People who are incarcerated, that's always a big one. They're supposed to keep B while they're in jail. A lot of times, though, they don't pay the premium and their B drops because they're not using it anyway. And then when they get out, they don't have an election period. Well, that's going to be a special election now. And another one is people that lose Medicaid. That's also going to be an SEP for Part B. Now, what's the process going to be to use that? How will it be tracked and verified? No idea. I guess we'll figure it out when we get there in a couple days here. So I really don't know how strict they will or won't be with this, especially in the employer one. The employer health plan making an omission. I think every employer fails to inform people well of how the B rules work. So I don't really know how they're going to verify that or to what extent they're going to critique it, but we'll see. Do some more delayed Part B stuff. HSA contributions are a big one when we're dealing with working people, especially HSA contributions, people who have Medicare A and or B. So long story short, if you have Medicare A only, or A and B, you cannot contribute to an HSA. You can have money in your HSA account and you can use it towards qualified expenses, but you can't contribute to it. And it's kind of weird. If you notice, the rule says you should not contribute to an HSA within 6 months of having Medicare. Well, why did they say that? Well, the reason is because when you apply for delayed Part B of Medicare, CMS will backdate Part A up to 6 months. So let's say I'm somebody who turned 65 in June, and then in October I retire. So I get a delayed Part B for November 1, because I retired and I got Part B. My B is going to start November 1, but my A is going to retro back to the month I turned 65. So that's why they say that, because that person's thinking, well, I'm not going to be on Medicare until November, so I can make HSA contributions up until the month of October. But once that A retro is back, then they're invalid HSA contributions they've made. So that's why they say 6 months. All right, remember to talk about your IRMA. So when you got working people who are 65 or older, IRMA sometimes comes into play. That's the income-related monthly adjustment amount. It's a nice way to say it's a penalty for making more money than you're allowed. So you just got to remember to talk about IRMA. I threw the grid up there quick. This is the new one, the 2023 IRMA grid. I won't dwell on it too long other than to say, remember they determine IRMA from 2 years prior. So 2023 will be based on an individual or a couple's income in 2021. There are life-changing qualifying events to appeal IRMA. So best example here is maybe in 2021 somebody made a fortune, made tons of money, but now they're retired in 2023. Well, that's a life-changing event, a qualifying event, so they can challenge that IRMA and say, I had a reduction in work hours. And those are some of the bigger ones. So reduction in work hours, retirement are two of the bigger allowed life-changing events. So they can appeal that and they'll win. They can say, yeah, I used to make that in 2021. Now I make much less. I shouldn't have an IRMA. And usually they will win that appeal. So that's the IRMA for B. But remember, same rules apply, but there's also an IRMA for D. It's easy to forget that one or just not get to it in general, and then people will get mad. So if they're paying a B IRMA, they're going to have a D IRMA, and there's the amounts. Grids look pretty much the same as last year. They allow a little more income than they did in 2022, however. And again, I'll send this out so you'll have the grid, and we can send the PowerPoint out as well. All right, big topic. So if you have a group of 20 or more, offering incentives to working people age 65 or older. So the idea behind this is you have an employer, maybe they have 50 employees, they got a bunch of people who are age 65 or older, they're on the under 65, the active plan, because they're working. And the employer maybe is paying 75% of the premium for that health plan. Obviously, it's costing the employer a lot of money. You've seen a lot in the past where what that employer will do is they can't force that person. It's illegal to force them off the active work plan and go on Medicare. But it's pretty enticing for them to make an offer to them So if they voluntarily want to go off, they will. Because if they come off the group plan, go on Medicare, it saves the employer a lot of money. And in many cases, it saves the employee a lot too. And you see things where employers say, look, if it's your choice, but if you come off the employer plan because you're 65 now, we'll pay your Part B premium, your Med Sup, and your Part D. So it's going to be a super coverage for you. And in that deal, it'll save the employee money, and even though the employer is paying for all those things, it's usually much cheaper than the group plan. The rules specifically in the Medicare secondary payer rules for working-aged individuals, it really specifically says employers cannot contribute to or have any involvement with individual Medicare or secondary coverage to Medicare. In other words, even though it's voluntary, the employer can't sweeten the pot by paying for supplement premiums in Part B to entice people off. This has been the rule for a long time. It hasn't been enforced. However, I'm being told that there are plans to start enforcing that substantially. So, I'm not telling you what to do, but when you're advising employers out there, this is something that I think will be under more scrutiny than it has in the past. For a group less than 20, you don't worry about it. They're not subject to the MSP rules, and they can offer incentives because that person on a group of less than 20, they got to sign up for Medicare Part B anyway. So they will, in that case, allow the employer can say, well, you're going to have B anyway. We'll help you out if you want to go on a supplement. So, a group less than 20, they don't have those rules, but over 20, they certainly do. And just again, remember, this comes up a lot. Somebody's actively working coverage through work. They cannot, if they're with an employer less than 20, they can't. They have to sign up for B. They can't waive it. I know in the past I used to even say to people, oh, don't worry about it, but it's something you need to worry about now. Over the last couple of years, we've had plenty of group plans come back, carriers come back and say, yeah, we're not paying that person's claims, or 80% of them anyway, because they didn't have B in place. Okay, that's it. How did I do in my time? I think I went over a little bit. No? Okay. So again, we'll send the recording out. We'll email it out to everybody. I'm going to look and see if we have questions. And we do. All right, so let's see what we got for questions here. Actually, we got a fair amount of them. So let me go through and see what we got. Somebody said, is this just a sales pitch for your company, or are the contents discussed in your email going to be covered? I think I covered them. I noticed that person left, though. So I guess they didn't stay long enough to have me get to the contents, but I think I covered the contents. There are exceptions for ESRD eligibility under or over age 65. Not sure I follow that question. If you want, you can follow up with me on that one. Will these slides be available after this call? Can you email them? Yes, we can certainly do that. Okay, so the question is, I just enrolled somebody who turned 65 in January and is on Social Security. She received her Medicare card with Parts A and B, but declined B since she was under her husband's plan. However, they just realized that the group is less than 20. She is submitting the paperwork. Oh boy, I just lost it. Here we go. Hang on a second. She submitted the paperwork in November to get her Part B reactivated. She just got confirmation today that B is active. I'm trying to get to the question here. Okay, so I enrolled her in MAPD using an SEP, losing group coverage, but she is in her IEP. Yeah, if she's in her IEP, you cannot use an SEP for loss of group coverage. It will be denied. So you got to go IEP. You can't. The SEP. So that's like I was speaking about earlier. This person's in her IEP still. Question is, can I use a SEP for loss of group? No, it'll get kicked out. Okay, the question is it that you cannot contribute, or it is simply that the contributions are not tax deductible for the HSA? I have a client that likes the convenience of the HSA but understands that the contributions are not tax deductible anymore. Not only are they not tax deductible, but they're penalized. So it's a good question, but they're ineligible contributions. They can't be deducted, and there's a penalty as well. And it looks like... So the Part B premium for 2023 actually went down. Yes, it went down to $164.90. Let's see. Last question. Okay. Ed, as we I think we got one more that popped up. But hang on one second. Let me just get to this one. Ed, as we head into 2023, how would you recommend a relative newbie to all things Medicare start to be 100% ready for AEP come October? I would say I wouldn't wait for AEP. I would start being ramped up now. I mean, we do more business in SEP than we do AEP. And again, we'd have to talk and figure out what your angle is, how you like to market, whether that be seminars, working mailers, which still work, but they're a true, you got to really know what you're doing with mailers. But SEP is the time to write business. You can write just as much, if not more, in SEP than you can during AEP. So I would just say it's really, Medicare is all about marketing. If you got the base knowledge, you're good. It's all about getting in front of people. So anyway, I would say it's really a matter of figuring out just how you want to market. Regarding the ESRD question, doesn't matter when you enroll in Medicare, the prior plan will have to be primary for a number of months. I believe it is at least 19, but maybe up to 36. I'd be happy to share info. I will email. Okay. I'm not sure I'm really following what you're saying. So yeah, maybe we can discuss it. That would be great. Okay, so my experience has been that a spouse can have Part A while they're on the spouse's group plan and still have an HSA. Have you heard this? I have heard it, and it's wrong. They cannot. You cannot have Part A or B whether you're a spouse or not. If you have A, you cannot contribute to an HSA. And I do know that for a fact. Okay, can a person waive both Parts A and B to continue making HSA contributions? Yes. Yes, they can, to answer your question. Good questions. Good questions today. Looks like that's all we have. I appreciate you guys joining me. I really do. We're going to do more of these webinars now. We'll do more next week and going forward. If anybody has suggestions on topics, please shoot them our way. I'm happy to take suggestions there. Anything you want to read about or I guess watch a webinar about, I'd be happy to go over. And we'll email out the recording. And other than that, I really appreciate you guys joining me. Thanks and have a great day. Have a happy New Year too. Thank you.